Greetings, programs. Welcome to Badgerpod Nerdcast number 51, Tron Fights for the Users. My name is Brian Martinez, and I am your host of the show, and I'm joined by some of our classic Badgery faces and some new ones. So I will go around quickly and introduce everyone who's here, and you guys say hello upon my introduction. So we have Rachel. Say hi, Rachel. Say hi.
Hi, everybody, and I'm not a program, I'm a user.
Say hello, Nephanor.
Hello, Nephanor, and I am beyond user. I am a super user.
And we have Hannah Wallen. Say hello, Hannah.
Hello.
We also have Dean Esme. Say
No,
hi,
yes. No, yes, no, yes. I am a bit.
Dean. And we have Dr. Randomer Cam.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here, and you can't prove I'm not. Yeah, I'm here twice. See, you can hear it. There's me, and there's the shadow me.
He is
Someone's
here,
got echo. Turn it off.
and he is here. We have just gotten an Oliver. Say hi, Oliver. What's up?
Hey.
And lastly, we have a special guest, Geek Variety, or Scott.
I'm special? Oh, that's so nice.
Well, you just never been on the show, but
Oh.
after today, you won't be special anymore.
Oh, well, I'll take it while I can get it, I guess.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, while you have it.
Indeed.
All right, so, wow, this is a lot of people for Tron, but let's see how it goes. But first, I'm going to do the mailbag stuff. So, let's do that. Kuguru Sahara has made an inquiry. I'm sending this message to Allison and Rachel of Honey Badger Radio. Since you're talking about some interesting topics on race and gender, I want to recommend a manga that you might find interesting. It's possibly the most odd take on tropes with a progressive twist. It's called A Centaur's Life. If you can send me an email address where you can send paragraphs, that would be greatly appreciated. As you can see, I kept this short because it generates blocks and blocks of text. Okay. Thank you for your letter, Kuguru Sahara. Rachel, have you heard of this thing called Centaur's Life? I'm gonna take that as a no.
No, wait, no, I haven't. I was wrestling with my stupid mute
that's
button. It wasn't the command key was not doing the thing it was supposed to do. So anyway, but no, I've never heard of this, but I actually I feel like looking into it now.
It sounds interesting. So we'll see. Thank you for your letter. If you want to give us some more information,
Yes, thank you.
anybody in the chat has heard of this book. Have any of you guys that's in the group here have heard of this Centaur's Life thing?
999!
Okay. If any of you guys know anything about it, you can go ahead maybe give us some comments or additional recommendations for or against it. All right. Ben has made an inquiry. Allison's summary. The following... Oh, wait. No, that's wrong. Hello, Badgers. I came across your wonderful website after watching Karen's response to 25 men bullshitting about male privilege. I always find the responses to Femme Frequency's videos far more thought out, intelligent, and accurate than the hard sell narrative and on offer from innocent, poor, sweet Anita and that guy in the background holding all the strings. As an egalitarian, I'm willing to hear the feminist perspective, even if I think it's largely one-sided and poorly thought out. Of course, I enjoy hearing a good argument, and the Honey Badgers never disappoint. The reason I'm writing to you is because of this little gem. And he links to an article from a website called genderfocus.com entitled Trekkie Response to Jennifer Leon's Arrest Disappoints. The responses from some Trek fans were pretty sad. However, I feel the author, who's quite clearly a feminist, though does not seem to be hitting the gender studies high notes, seems to completely forget that there is an entire marketplace full of magazines filled with ripped, spray-on tan men, usually seen on soap operas, dramas, or films, that were snapped having a holiday with their family. Naturally, their shirts are usually off, and a good close-up of their midsection is required. The author's comment, the first thing I take offense at is the focus on her physical appearance. It reinforces the idea that women are only acceptable if they meet a certain standard of beauty and that their value is determined by the male gaze. It's largely ironic because the standards of male beauty in the TV and film screen has been progressively moving towards more and more towards roid heads. Australia has an apparently popular drama known as Home and Away, an overly dramatic show about the events of a seaside town and their ever-attractive people that live there. Go back in time 20 years, and the men were pale, hairy, average-looking guys that looked like they attended the gym once a week or so at the very least and did a lot of running. These days, it looks like the runway for sports stars and underwear models. So, Badgers, am I seeing things and going crazy? Or is this a double standard that feminists ignore because accepting that women have the same gaze with regards to beauty would weaken their arguments? Ben from Australia. Well, thank you, Ben, for that comment. Hannah, you wanted to say something about that.
Yeah, he's very much right about feminists wanting the double standard ignored, and this is something that they do with a lot of things. They treat the female experience as the only important experience when it comes to a particular topic or idea, and so basically it doesn't matter if it happens to both sexes. It only matters when it happens to women, and of course they'll go through, it's not just with this particular topic, not just with the physical appearance topic. They do the same thing with domestic violence. They do the same thing with sexual violence, workplace issues, pay, everything. But what they do then is they base the idea that women are uniquely oppressed on all of these focuses on women's experiences of things that they consider to be oppressive. And then they'll base the idea that only women's experiences in these areas are important on the claim that women are uniquely oppressed. So they cannot have anything detract from any part of that circular reasoning, because as soon as you pull one little brick out, the entire wall or the entire house falls down. And yeah, this is I mean, it even goes back like when I was, I guess I would have been in junior high, maybe early high school. I had pictures from I can't even remember the names of the magazines now, but there are magazines marketed to teenage girls that are full of pop stars,
like Tiger Beat and
Tiger Beat's one of them,
and stuff like that.
Yeah. They had, and I had Kirk Cameron and Michael J. Fox up on my walls, and the Danny Wood from the New Kids on the Block and all that. I had all that stuff up until it got creepy that there were so many eyeballs looking out of the walls in my room, and I took it all down. But the thing is, those magazines make a lot of money selling pictures of good-looking guys to young women. It's not a one-way thing at all.
And there's way more of them, actually. Yeah. There's actually a lot more different ones, and they're basically just pinups. That's like all that's in there is pinups. That's why you buy them,
Yep. And the other thing is, if you look at a lot of the pinups that are designed for more mature women, not necessarily, say, like 40 or 50-year-old women, but women that have reached adulthood, and you look at those pinups, there's a significant difference between female pinups and male pinups. Women are considered attractive just on the basis of their looks. They don't have to do anything else to be considered attractive. It's easy as pie. As long as you look good, you're attractive. Men have to add something that makes them utilitarian. They have to be useful, or they're not attractive. And so when you have pinups for, say, the college-age chick, and pinups for the younger 20s set and 30s set, and the girls that would go to something like Chippendales, those guys have to be police officers or firemen or construction workers or something along those lines. They have to be, and even in the Teen Beat and all those magazines, those guys were movie stars and rock stars and stuff like that. They couldn't just be hot. They weren't just models. And when you look at pinups for guys, there are women who are just models. They don't have to be anything special except a model. Guys can't get away with that. So where women complain that they're being reduced to their appearance, what their complaint really reveals is that women can get by on their appearance. If a woman has her appearance and something else, then she's, a higher grade of attractive. But she can be attractive without that something else. If a man just has his appearance, he's not considered as that attractive. He's not good enough to put into the magazines. He's not good enough to be a pinup. He's just an attractive guy, but he's useless. That double standard doesn't discriminate against women. It discriminates against men. And it's quite ridiculous that women damsel over it. Because what it basically says is a woman's place, a woman's existence, doesn't have to be earned. Her value is in her existence. She can elicit a response just by being there, whereas a man has to earn his.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's why I think also women. Another thing that's could be considered a pinup is guys that are like wearing like suits and stuff and look like they have like they're CEOs or successful in some way. Like that, like a guy in a tuxedo is very attractive. That's why that line, I love a man in uniform. It's like that. That's a kind of uniform too. Nephanor?
Yeah, actually, something going along this is also the fact that there's the double standard in terms of what it is. They look at the women who are in these the models and they say, oh, well, this is just sexualization for the male gaze. But when you have a man in the exact same kind of thing, exact same look, oh, no, that's a male power fantasy. It's like, no, it's sexualization. You just don't want to admit it.
Yeah. All right. Any other final thoughts on this letter before I move on? Okay. All right. So let's get into the main topic. So we're talking about the film. I guess it's more like a phenomenon because there are films, there are games, there's lots of other stuff, but it never really blew up. It wasn't like enormous. It's got more of a cult following. I'll do the reading for Tron and Tron Legacy. When game designer and computer genius Kevin Flynn has his product stolen from him by ambitious corporate mogul Ed Dillinger, he is dragged into the digital world known as the Grid. Here he must team up with the denizens of the Grid known as programs in order to find the evidence he needs to expose the truth about Dillinger's plans as well as free the programs from Dillinger's own master control program. It is a story not unlike The Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland, taking place in a fantasy digital world of color, geometric landscapes, and danger around every corner. Tron Legacy was released in 2010. It is the story of Kevin Flynn's son, Sam, who returns to the Grid to find his long-lost father. History repeats itself, as Sam is dragged into the games, and the Grid is once again in the hands of a tyrant by the name of Clue. Soon, after things become a bit more complex when Sam is reunited with his father in the Grid and learns of all the unfortunate events that led to Kevin Flynn's exile from the real world. After this, it is a race against time as the heroes attempt to make their way to the portal home while stopping Clue from invading the real world with an army of repurposed programs. Both films did not do well in the box office, but have a cult following. The concepts and ideas explored in both are abstract, and the sci-fi setting may have actually hurt the franchise more so than it would have if it was a fantasy film. Bear with me. In Tron, the Master Control Program, the MCP, is an artificial intelligence has declared itself that users do not really exist and persecutes those who will not renounce their belief. This makes for a Christian allegory, as Kevin is a sort of persecuted demigod. Tron Legacy explores legitimately Buddhist themes of struggle with the ego and non-duality. This is not surprising considering that Jeff Bridges, who stars in both Tron films, is a practicing Buddhist. Bridges invited Zen master Bernie Glassman to come onto the set as an informal consultant. Tron Legacy's pragmatic view of reality is consistent with the Mahayana Buddhist notion of non-duality, in which reality is an ultimately subjective concept. This point is hammered home at the end of the film when Kevin explains that Clue's evil is rooted in his own misguided view of the world. Clue and Flynn are two sides of the same coin. He explains that a perfect world cannot be imagined and implemented. Instead, perfection is in front of us, and we must learn to see it. Conceptually, these films are saying a lot more about the human condition than I believe they get credit for. Does anyone have a comment about, well, either what I said or just Tron in general? Dean.
Brian, I've always
go ahead, Oliver.
thought that there was some pretty major stuff going on with Tron. The most obvious thing being that the things that were happening in the grid in the original film were basically, a matching dichotomy against what was happening in the real world. Dealing with the MCP and SARC and all that other stuff. And of course, it's obvious. It should be obvious to anyone watching it that the same characters are portrayed, within the grid space as their real-life counterparts. I think Tron has always been a great film, poorly understood because of the time in which it came out. Like, let's consider the idea that if Tron had originally come out within, say around the year 2000, right, roughly, around the same time The Matrix came out, it would have been just loved. People would have lost their minds over it. Just the story in and of itself. But then we, have to look at when those similar movies were coming out based around games or computers and things like that, and there's a kind of a consistent pattern there where their huge cult followings didn't necessarily do great in the box office, but they left a huge lasting impact on people. So we got things like Tron, The Last Starfighter, what else came out? Oh, Cloak and Dagger, movies just based around those ideas, and I think that they're asking really, really important questions. They're asking questions about how we as people interface with technology and the impact that those things would end up having on our lives. I think Tron, out of all of those, was the best to kind of predict that, where a whole lot of their lives were tied up into the computer systems and tied into the grid.
Okay, Dean, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I had a problem with my microphone. I had a real different experience. In fact, I find it a little disorienting listening to Oliver talk. And I'm not sneering or anything. I'm just, I'm guessing he's younger than me. I saw it in 1982, and I would have been still a teenager when I saw it.
Yeah.
And I walked out really disappointed in that film. But in retrospect, I never thought it was that strong a movie. And I was actually shocked people of a younger generation did like it, because I still couldn't see what they liked. Now, but part of it from my perspective was I was already deeply invested in computer technology at the time, teaching myself to program in assembly language and BASIC. So I have to admit I had some of the snotty teenage boys, I know better than this, that's wrong, because it seemed very technically wrong to me at the time. But I do, on the other hand, I saw Tron, I'm sorry, what was the movie from 2010?
Tron Legacy.
Tron Legacy, and it had some of the same weaknesses of the original, but believe it or not, watching it made me appreciate the 1982 film better, because it didn't seem very realistic to me in the sense that it didn't feel like anything I could relate to, and I was really into computer technology at the time. But when I saw the Tron Legacy, it made me appreciate Tron like, well, they weren't going for technical verisimilitude. They were trying to ask philosophical questions. And if I can get out of the fact that there's nothing realistic about that portrayal of the technology, and I treat it entirely as mythology, which is kind of what the second movie forced me to do, I can sort of see Oliver's point. And it is, I mean, it's a fantasy that's an allegory of sorts, but it kind of, I mean, we're going to be wrestling with we're starting to now, and people snarl, still growing at me, but I'm like, the next 2 years, you see what's coming up in AI, we're going to have some real interesting philosophical questions, and they were trying to poke at those questions as far back as 81, 82. That's pretty cool.
I don't find that that's a strange thing, because that's the thing about it is Tron is a movie that, in both movies, and probably the whole genre, I find that it seems that it's pretty divided. Like, you either hate it or you love it. And one of the things, and I can see both sides of it. I watched it today with someone, and the person I saw it with was, like basically said a lot of the stuff in the movie makes no sense. In both movies, and I get that. If you look at logically, and you're looking for plot holes and stuff, you'll find tons of it. And I think that why that happens, in my opinion, is not that it does make sense, you just don't get it, but I think that you're looking at it. This is why I pointed out that, to me, Tron is in the unfortunate position of being a film that looks like it's science fiction, but there's no science in it. And so if you're someone who's interested in the setting in terms of it being something that takes place in a computer universe or inside of a video game or whatever, then you're going to find all the stuff that's wrong with it. And if you look at it logically, it feels wrong. Like it doesn't do any of the stuff, that well. And I see it, like when I saw it as a kid, I remember liking it because it was just visually, it was new. I'd never seen anything like it before. There's a lot of interesting trivia behind how Disney made that film and how it was on, like, not a lot of budget, but a lot of work, and there's a lot to be impressed with on a technical filmmaking level. But when you are someone who knows computers and you know how things are supposed to be, then yeah, I mean it doesn't make a lot of sense. And even Tron Legacy, which builds on, it has to build on the foundation of what Tron is, even though we have more knowledge now and it's more sort of commonplace and accessible. They can't really change the way the setting of Tron worked in order to rebuild Tron Legacy, so they just built on what was already there and had a lot of throwback stuff in it to the original film, but included other things that basically existed outside of the technical aspects. And that's the part about Tron and Tron Legacy that I really like the most, is how Tron is about, this, essentially you have this master program, and it's blocking people from, it's not allowing other programs to essentially communicate with their users. And in being that gatekeeper, it's also decided that users do not exist, and it's made it illegal. And any program in the world that thinks that there is such a thing as users are considered blasphemers, or they're considered religious zealots, or they're basically outlawed for their beliefs. And they're also put in games, which is sort of a throwback to, like, ancient Rome, and so you have like these sort of commentaries on monarchies and totalitarianism and the control of information, and disconnecting people from you could say their parents in a way, because the users created them. And then when Tron Legacy comes along, it does like a different thing where you have like this great thing with the father and son relationship, and basically it's more, I see it like a science fantasy that doesn't even have a lot of science in it. And I like the stories for those reasons, but I also know that we're looking at films that at best have a cult following, and by most people they're not really popular. I think that because I don't know if you guys know this, but when the first Tron came out, it did so bad that Disney tried to re-release it in 1983, and it did even worse, and they decided that they weren't going to make any live-action films. They didn't make a live-action movie for like 10 years after that. And they'd also suffered a real big loss from The Black Hole, which had come out in the late 70s, which also didn't do very well at all either. So they were just having a bad streak, and I think that they were also reaching for, maybe they had like ideas and that the technology couldn't possibly compensate for, I don't know. So I'm going to leave it at that. I think Nefanor is next, so I'm going to pass it to you, Nef.
Okay. First thing I wanted to follow up on what you were saying is, yes, in a way, there was so many things wrong with the technical aspect of Tron, but I don't look at it as this is a sci-fi movie set in this vein of a computer. I look at it as it's a personal exploration of himself that happens to be set in a world that looks like a computer, and because of the fact that he was all about computers. For him, when he explores himself, how's he going to see it? He's going to see it in terms of computers. Yes, there were external actors that were forcing things upon him in his own mind, but I still see it as his own inner journey of himself and what his life was. And in terms of the second movie, that was his son coming in and finding out about him, learning about him, and realizing what his father had done. And in a way, it's a hero's journey in that respect. He started out as nobody and didn't really think much of his father, but came to learn who he was and became a hero in his own right.
All right, Rachel?
Oh, you want? Oh, sorry. Sorry. I finally managed to get this thing to work. All right. I don't really have much to say about this because I still feel like I need to watch this film because I'm talking about the first film, of course. I think I need to watch it a couple more times to understand what the hell was even going on. I think most of the messages were not subtle at all. In fact, they were really, really overt. But the thing I want to say is I actually have to disagree with Oliver on his point saying that if it were to come out, I don't know, around the time of The Matrix, that it would have done a lot better. I think a lot of what makes the movie Tron work is a certain level of ignorance about computers. There's so much that is unknown that it gives people enough room to imagine something there. It's the unknown that sort of allows for a good deal of fantasy to take place. Like you try to read something that was from the Victorian era, that there are things that will be a bit of a problem because there'll be something that is based on an unknown there that you now know. And so now it's just kind of like, okay, well, this is really weird. But the thing that makes Tron work is that lack of knowledge, that the fact that computers were so new and it was this cool hip thing. It's just, and you don't know very much about it. There's so much there to explore, and that's really what I think makes it work. And rather than it's hard to rather than the time period. That's what allows people to sort of suspend, sort of, I don't know.
Yeah.
They don't need there to be science there.
It's kind of a product of its time.
Yes.
Dean?
Hi. Well, I don't entirely disagree with Nephenor. Maybe I hadn't quite made the point that when I saw it in 1982, I was completely dismissive because none of the idea of it being mythological or a personal journey resonated with me at that time, and I just knew too much about computer technology. And it just occurred to me, okay, I did the math, I was 16, I was still learning to program on computers like the Apple II and the TRS-80 and the Commodore 64. This is before the IBM PC. This is before MS-DOS. This is before Microsoft was anybody. And it just felt so wrong. But I was saying that in the passage of time since, it's much easier for me to now look at it as a allegory because we've had so much goes on. And actually, I mean, if you want to really get into it, computer hardware, especially if you look at how they're designing CPUs today, and computer software, especially, there's whole breeds of computer software that writes itself now, and everything's so abstracted and modularized that the Tron Legacy was much more believable. All I have to do is turn off the part that says that was doable in 1982 technology. No, it wasn't. All I have to do is turn my brain off and say, no, this is magic. And now the Tron universe looks like something fascinating. And I'm more open to it. And I kind of appreciate your point of view now.
No,
and Oliver's point of view as well. I appreciate it more now. I can see that better now.
Oh, cool. All right, so Scott, you would like to talk.
Yeah. Well, I saw it in '82 and I was 10 at the time-ish, roughly. And the thing I remember about it most was that it was just kind of this very fantastical thing. You know, I was starting to get into computers and stuff. I had a TI 99 4A at the time. I had learned to write some really bad code. So there was enough there in the movie to kind of be like, oh, wow, this is so neat. This is something I like. And the fact that it was about games, in a way, was also something that was very kind of something that I liked and I was really into.
You were 10 and didn't know everything yet.
Exactly.
I did at 16. Know everything. I wish I had that back sometimes.
That's
anyway.
the age of all knowledge. Yeah, totally.
That's right.
But the thing that was interesting to me was that I never thought about it until I saw Legacy, and I rewatched it again today, and I never thought about the messaging that was going on in the movie. But there is a very heavy religious bent to it, where Flynn is God, Clue is Satan, and his son is, well, whatever. But the thing that really nailed it home was there's this scene where Clue and his henchmen find Flynn's house or his lair or whatever, and he picks up this silver apple and is just looking at himself in the silver apple, and then he smashes the table with it, and he's just it's very, very on the nose. But I
love that stuff too.
Yeah, and it's funny though, because like if you're just passively watching it, you can very easily miss what they're pushing at you, and on second glance, it's like, wow, they're really kind of trying to nail this home. It's kind of funny. So,
Oliver.
Okay, so I've got a couple of rebuttals here to defend my point about whether or not Tron would have been more successful and closer to the year 2000.
I draw my sword.
Okay, it's going down. It's going down. Like somebody's going to walk out of here alive, and somebody else is going to be left in a dead mess. Basically, here's the thing. Especially, it was a great point that Dean was making about his age and what he knew about technology in that time. Okay, like that's what we're really talking about is he was having a suspension of disbelief problem because he actually knew how computers work versus how the general population of people were still very unfamiliar with computers at that time. And if we take Tron, let's make a comparison between Tron and The Matrix. Why was The Matrix successful? Well, it had some really, really cool special effects that got people's attention, obviously, and so does Tron. We know that everything that they were talking in The Matrix was complete hogwash. Like, they made up a completely different computer language that nobody's ever heard of, that doesn't even exist. And they talked around those things as much as possible because the computers weren't the point. It was what was happening with them that was the point. And I think that when you look at the passage of time, specifically between Tron leading up to The Matrix and how people were receiving that, if you'll recall, the show Reboot, which is more or less Tron, was very, very popular, very successful, and even won a few awards. And that came out in, I want to say, 1993, 1994. So what ended up happening was that the population itself became more familiar with the concepts of computers and the idea of digital realities and all that other stuff. And so people were getting a lot more acclimated to that. And I think it's great that I'm here with Dean, and he is much older than me, because then we can actually compare and contrast against our age groups. Like, I'm going to be 34 here in December, and I always grew up with those things being kind of a part of my adolescence. Like, I remember when, they were putting Apple IIs in classrooms and things like that and getting killed, playing Oregon Trail and all that other stuff.
My favorite computer.
It was much easier for me to accept those things within the space of storytelling. When you take my generation, you plopped us down in front of The Matrix, and we were like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. That was basically... that was the Tron for my generation, I guess, when you could really just lay it out like that. As a teenager, that's when I saw it. I was like 17 years old when the first Matrix came out, and you were a teenager when Tron came out. But I think that the world's understanding of that tech caught up to match the type of story that was attempting to be told. We see, like, last time we were here or not last time we were on Honey Badger Radio, and then I'll pass the mic. We talked about Metal Gear Solid 2 at one point, and I remember that discussion where people also commented that they didn't understand the themes and the things that were being discussed by Kojima. Now that we're a little bit older, and then we turn back and look at this and we're like, holy crap, I know exactly what is being talked about and being described here. And so I think that's kind of a factor in this, where we have to get a little bit older and then turn around and look at something because we have new eyes and new understanding of the world and how all these things connect together. So
some of the best stuff was stuff I didn't appreciate as a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, even if I saw it.
the other thing is the culture change too. Like in 1982, how many people owned computers?
Very.
It was very rare, right?
Yeah, in fact, I can just give you the quick answer. For me, it was bad because I knew too much. For everybody else, it was mostly over their heads, and it was just like a strange magic universe they didn't understand.
Exactly.
That's kind of what that would be like. That's how I think most people saw it.
Yeah, and the thing about Tron Legacy might have been that they were still carrying on with that magical universe, but now too many people know too much about computers, and though they're looking at it like this doesn't make sense. You know, like because it's still taking the same they can't change the mythology that the world that they've created in Tron too much, because there are people who like Tron that want to see a sequel, but they don't want it to be really different. So when they go into Tron Legacy, you have the same problem, except that they miss the sweet spot where now you have everyone owns a computer. There's a computer basically in every home, and on top of that, most people have enough, at least the target audience, have enough knowledge about computers that they would be able to look at Tron Legacy and say, logically, I don't get this. Maybe too much time has passed. And maybe Tron was too early and Tron Legacy was too late. In that regard, you know, because I'm looking at why did they both fail? I mean, Tron Legacy did better, but it didn't do, like, it still didn't, it was just enough to where maybe they could make a sequel, but it wasn't a success.
In both cases, their reach way exceeded their grasp, and I think that's a real problem in both cases. Although, again, I'm actually kind of appreciating the little mythos more now, but yeah.
All right, I'm going to give it to Mike because he has something to say.
All right, yeah, I swear, I've seen Tron, the original Tron, like 7 or 8 times in the past 20 years. And I still don't remember.
That explains everything.
But I still don't remember what happens in the fucking story, like how it you know, like it concludes in the end, or how the set pieces even link together. And that might say more about me than it says about the film, but it might be indicative that there's something about the story that's simply not, you know, gripping. It does seem like it was all about the set pieces, all about the unique kinds of action scenes they were capable of doing. But from what little I can remember about the story, it's sort of a reverse of the Fern Gully setup or the Avatar setup, wherein a human ends up in this alien world and the humans are the bad guys. In Tron, a human ends up in the other world and the denizens of that world are the bad guys. And the Matrix is it's not quite either. Humans are the good guys, but everyone's inhabiting everything. In Tron, it's very much there's a race of evil aliens, and they're living within sort of the human world, and they're the bad guys. People don't like that. Audiences don't like that. Whether it's a planet or a forest or an arcade machine, audiences, perhaps just in this day and age in PC climate, prefer to be the bad guys, and they don't like the idea that humans can create evil things that they then have to destroy. There's something unpalatable about it, for perhaps obvious reasons, perhaps overreached reasons in some cases.
That might explain it, because the first Tron has this weird biblical thing going on too, about the denouncement of God, and you're not allowed to have gods except for me, which is the master control program. Rachel.
Okay. All right. So here's the thing, though. The reason I think that, and I'm going to be honest here, and this might disappoint some people, the reason why I think the Matrix works and Tron just kind of sort of falls flat, and this is it, for me. Well, the Matrix really isn't about the technology. I know it sounds really fucking weird considering everybody's talking all of this technical lingo and it takes place in a digital world and everything like that. It's not about that. It's about the feeling that everybody has that something about their life is wrong. That something that they have the possibility of doing something else with their life, but for some reason they fell into something else, and now they're just kind of riding along and grind into the daily grind, and everything just feels fake, and they're disgruntled, they're angry about what could have been, and this is a kind of redemption story. It's like, oh, by the way, yeah, all of those feelings that you've had all your entire life that you could be doing something else, yeah, that's entirely real. Yeah, you're actually basically Superman. And that's why after that point, the other two fucking films don't work. Everything else, because at that point he's fucking Superman. He's like a god, and you don't give a shit anymore. That's why the first movie, Stand Alone, is fantastic because it's the feeling, it's the every man going on his quest and having his own personal redemption. This is also Tron is also a redemption kind of story, but Tron is kind of it's sort of a situation where you have somebody and then they go and they free a people or a world from a dictatorship or something like that. But that's been done so many times. By the time you watch Tron, being somebody my age and that being new, it just feels kind of why. It just feels like I've seen this way. Oh, okay. There's religion in here too. All right. I've seen this before. You feel like you've already seen that film so many times that there's no point and the only thing new is the effects, and the effects to some degree can become almost distracting. And so it's from what's really taking place in the merits of the film. And I've seen that in others too, where they take a very dramatic visual style and it kind of distracts from everything else that you're trying to do with it. And that's kind of where I think Tron falls apart. There's probably a lot of different themes there, but I've seen them in so much media, so much content, and I've seen it across my life so much that I feel like I've already seen this film before, but this is just done with like a later late show. And I don't know.
I think that I like both Tron and The Matrix, but I think there is you were right about The Matrix. One of the reasons why it worked was because it was connecting in a more human way. And they both have this thing where there is another world that is controlled by a tyrant, and the humans are responsible for both of these worlds too, because in the Matrix, men built the machines, and then the machines imprisoned us and turned us into batteries. While in Tron, it's a little bit more like there's a finger you can point at, because in the original Tron, the Master Control program was designed by Dillinger, or enhanced by Dillinger, and it started off as a chess program, and then it became self-aware, and basically started to close off the grid and take control. And it was actually intending on controlling the outside world too, because it was like hacking into the Pentagon and the Kremlin and stuff. So it was basically getting out of hand. But I think that there's definitely some parallels, and I bet the folks at the Wachowskis would probably look at Tron as some inspiration for it. But I think it just comes down to the execution, because as was said, in the chat, some of the language in Tron was a bit too. It might have been like out of people's reach, or understanding. It wasn't common knowledge unless you were somebody who was into computers. The person who came up with the concept was really into computers himself, and he had a lot of nods in the film to people who, like the guy who designed the first monitor, his name is mentioned as a character and stuff like that. So it was clearly like really maybe too nerdy. I don't know. Scott, I'm going to give you the floor. I think you're next.
Yeah, sure. Basically I think part of the issue with Tron was that, like you were saying, people weren't familiar with the parlance of computers. They weren't acclimated, or they didn't know what a byte was. They didn't know what a bit was. These concepts were very foreign in 1982, and I think that was probably a big stumbling block to bring people in. But just as a note here, Tron was the 22nd highest grossing film in 1982, so it didn't do poorly at $33 million. So it wasn't a complete failure. But I think it was probably a steep learning curve for people to get into it at that time. Whereas it's like there's this part where they're breaking into the facility in NCOM, and Flynn's got this little gadget that he puts on this door and it opens it up. It's like, people look at that and they're like, whoa, what's that? That's weird. But when they mirror that scene in Legacy, when his son Sam is breaking into NCOM's computers, he's using a smartphone. So there's like this connection there where it's, everybody's got a smartphone. They know what this thing is. Whereas in 1982, people were like, oh my gosh, what is this alien technology? It's so strange, So
it's like he's Santa Claus.
Yeah, it was. I think it was very strange for people. I think they didn't have I don't think there was a doorway in for most people, frankly, at that time. because Dean obviously was in the computers and things at the time. He was 16, so it was a very fresh thing for him, and he was all about it and all that kind of thing. And I was just getting into it, being 10. So it was very this world that I was like, oh, I want to be a part of that world. That's something I want to know about. It's something I want to do. And so for older people, I think there might have been a stumbling block just for this simple fact that they just didn't know what it was. It was a very foreign concept, just kind of across the board, even though there were those themes of religion and redemption and all these other sorts of things in there. I think maybe most people saw it as a kiddie movie. It's a Star Wars, it's a Star Trek, it's something like that, it's like, that's for kids. It's Disney.
There were ships and motorcycles and all that.
Yeah, and it was a Disney film too, so I don't know if because I wanted to see it at the time, but I don't know that my parents were particularly fond of it. So me and some friends rode our bikes up to the Strand up in Baltimore and watched it there one Saturday. So I have a feeling that it may have been an issue of maybe the learning curve, as it were, for people to get into it. I think there was just a barrier, like an understanding barrier at the time. So.
All right, Dean.
I'm going to speed some nerd heresy here, maybe. But it is interesting. My head spins a little thinking, comparing Tron to the Legacy Oh, sorry, I just got my what's the other film we're talking about? The Matrix. Sorry. So it makes my head spin to talk about these two movies because I don't think Tron had the kind of cultural impact that the Matrix did. I may be wrong. But I can see why they were both striving in the same direction. But here's an interesting thing I'm going to say. Whatever merits there is to Tron, I actually think it's going to have more staying power. People will look back at it at least as an enigma. Right? Well, what was this? And I don't know. Does anybody know? Are there comics? Is anybody continuing with this little mythos, or is it just these?
The Tron mythos? Yeah. Oh yeah. There's video games. There was a cartoon series called Tron Uprising that came out when Tron Legacy came out.
But is there some ongoing attempt to keep like a whole mythos going, a structured universe going?
They have. Well, that's what I'm saying. There was the Tron.
There's been various efforts.
They've tried
too.
Various
times. I think that if I were to reinvent Tron, I might be able, as a writer, to squeeze something out of that because there's enough mythical, what you might call mythical elements in it. You could play with it. On the other hand, I'm pretty convinced that The Matrix was basically not particularly a great movie. And if you are of a certain age, which would include nerds like me and nerds like Oliver and maybe a little younger, but from what I can see, nobody in the younger generation gives a shit about it. In fact, and I can see why, because I tried to sit and watch it with my kid when he was 15. He could barely keep his eyes open. He just kept telling me he was bored. And, I realized that when you talk about virtual reality, all the stuff that was in The Matrix had already been in cyberpunk novels, for those of us who used to read our science fiction anyway. There's nothing in The Matrix. It's not a particularly good film otherwise. It's not a very strong story, and nobody's going to remember it if they grew up after it's coming. How's that for a controversy?
Whoa, okay, that's a whole other show? We're going to try to... Guys, I know you're in line. You want to talk. This is about Tron. Let's try not to talk about The Matrix. I'm sure the comment section will be alight with discussion. Very intelligent, well thought out commentary about The Matrix. But we'll try and stay on Tron. Oliver is next. Oliver.
I thought there was some pretty interesting points being made there, especially when we went back to Rachel and her why moment. One thing that I realized between The Matrix and Tron, to continue the comparison and the success and the failure of those, especially with the sequels for The Matrix, like people really didn't like Revolutions or Reloaded, and talking about he basically became Superman and things like that. And you can actually kind of look and draw and compare, and that might be one of the reasons that Tron had it failing, is that The Matrix, the first Matrix film, follows a classic hero's journey cycle. It really does. Like, regular guy, he has to go into a whole new world. He learns things, he grows in the process and all that. But Tron doesn't really have that. Like, okay, yeah, there's Flynn and he's got a beef, but there's no weight, there's no impact for it. Like, he's going to go do this thing. He's, breaking back into MCon, and then jumps into the grid and sees these things that he's created, but then we spend the rest of the movie in there, and he's just kind of tagging along for the adventure. Even though he's the user, he's this great thing, but there's this lack of impact for him. And then, especially how the movie ends, like, he pops out, and no one's actually really quite sure what he's done. Like, yeah, the MCP's been shut down, and then you're just like, okay. And oh yeah, now I have all this money, everything's great. And so the type of storytelling has some pretty critical flaws that remind me of the Matrix sequels, where when you sit down, you watch Reloaded, you're kind of asking yourself, what is the point of this exactly? And then you watch
on the
Revolution.
freeway.
Yeah, exactly. You're just like, what? Why are we doing this? Like, you understand there's stuff happening, but it doesn't have the same level of impact as the more personal story of the original Matrix film. Like, you grow very attached and connected to Neo, and that awkward relationship or romance that's starting to form between him and Trinity. And it's more of a kind of a fish out of water story where he's got all this weight on his shoulders and all these things that he's supposed to do, but those things just don't happen with Tron. And I think that might be one of its biggest weaknesses. Just as you were saying how you think that you could probably retool that story, I think that if we actually sat down and made an effort to take all the core components of Tron of Tron, make it work, I think that it's possible to come up with a blockbuster thing. I don't think it's the material of the world that's the issue. I think it might just be not a good enough story being told in that space.
I agree.
It could also be I think that if you work on the world building and make it pretty tighter, because you're given something that's a little bit broken because it was made in 1982 by a bunch of people who didn't really know much about computers. They were basically creating a fantasy when they made it, based on little knowledge that they actually had about computers when they made the world. So when Legacy came along, they couldn't really diverge too much. They had to stick with that. I think that if you tighten up the world building on Tron in general, and try to tell a story that was doing something really new or was approaching it in a really unique way or whatever, you could definitely have a really strong product.
And I think part of the problem with that was it was a Disney film. I think the original, wasn't it?
Yes, they both were.
Yeah. And that was in the 80s, in the late 70s and 80s. They were sort of getting into this this point where they just jumped off into stories where a level of suspension of disbelief was required that people were expected to exercise just because it was Disney. Like, they didn't have to really establish aspects of the story that maybe other organizations, other writers, other studios and stuff might have to establish. They just sort of dive in both feet. Get rid of your disbelief here. This is Disney coming in. But there were also some other factors that may have contributed to the difference in the way people accepted and identified with the movie Tron versus The Matrix. Both films are basically the use of combined metaphor and hyperbole to communicate that even under the oppressive hand of a tyrannical, dictatorial system of power, you control your own destiny. You just have to figure out how to use the system against itself. One point both have in common is communicating the admonition that you can't fight back against such a power unless you first learn to see and understand the system behind the various factors you're up against in your quest to be free from the tyranny or free to control your own destiny. And with The Matrix, everything was an illusion. With Tron, you had to figure out what was behind everything that was happening in that system. And you couldn't just go through, in either one of those, you couldn't just go through your everyday life and deal with things as they seemed and deal with things as they were presented to you and succeed. You actually had to get past that presentation to the system itself and start chucking away at the system and whatever was in charge of the system. And I think part of the reason that Tron didn't affect people the way the Matrix did was that, and then this is a subtle change because the difference wasn't very big, but we didn't have quite the level of disconnect as a society that we have today between your everyday person and the systems and people which govern and administrate our lives through policy and law. So people were just enough less prepared to identify with the metaphor, I think, at that point when in 1982 than they were in 1999. And I would bet that today folks are even more prepared, maybe a lot more prepared to deal with either one of them than they were during either one of those time periods because the disconnect has grown even further. So I think that may have contributed greatly to people's inability to really accept and identify with the original, even back in the 80s there was some level of disconnect. Even back in the 80s the metaphor made sense to people. I just don't think maybe people were as ready to get it.
Yeah, I think that the other thing is with I want to talk about Tron Legacy momentarily because there's even more stuff going on in that conceptually, maybe not technically. I mean, yes, it's beautiful. It's like a gorgeous looking film, and it has spectacular effects and a kick-ass fucking soundtrack. But I also like some of the narrative things that were going on there, like the father and son relationship between the two Flynns. And you have like this pretty like you don't get a lot of films about fathers and sons, like these days, and I really like seeing that. And then there's like this, there's another religious thing in there where, as I believe Scott pointed out, there's the scenes with Clue, but there's also the bit where near the getting close to the third act. Sam Flynn, the son of Kevin Flynn, says we have to stop Clue because he's going to do this crazy thing, and his father says the thing is that Clue is me, like that is who I am, because when he created him, he had this utopic idea of what he could do with the system. So it's like he overthrows the system of the grid by destroying or otherwise getting rid of the master control program. Then Dillinger loses his job, and then Flynn takes over. After that, he sees the potential of the grid, starts going in there regularly, and his goal is to make it the perfect system. So he has this idea, I'm going to make it perfect, I'm going to improve on it, I'm going to expand it, and he creates Clue to help him do it because he can't be in the system all the time because he has a son that he has to raise, in the meantime, and he has a family. And that search for a utopia is a really cool concept too, because he learns in because he was so ambitious, because of what he was trying to do, and he programs Clue to help him do it. He realizes that perfection, this utopia, is basically unattainable. You can't do it. So, and the fact that he lives with that remorse, and it's almost like him being banished to the grid as a result, is him paying his penance for it. And I really like that as well, because he basically deals with this reality that he has imprisoned himself in a manner of speaking, as Clue has done this, in the grid, and he has to stay there, and he has to pay his penalty, and he was willing to do that. There's also a really interesting concept of the ISOs, which essentially they're revealed in Tron Legacy as this thing that manifested like a flame, which is another sort of Buddhist a commentary on Buddhism, where you have these acts of this moments of chaos that come out of what when you're looking for order, and that you can adapt to accept them, and that there is something beautiful and special about it. So when these ISOs show up, I think that they're almost like things that have always lived there, but he found that existed in the system. They're like aliens in a way, but they're naive, and they represent an X factor. And of course, Clue doesn't like this because he's built, programmed, and designed specifically to create the perfect system, something that has that doesn't come from users or programs, can't be perfect. It's going to throw everything off, and that's where basically all of the stuff happens in the second film. And I mean, I love all that stuff, and it's something that a lot of people either miss or they're just sort of like, oh, I like the soundtrack and the special effects, or they felt that the movie moved slow or whatever. But those are the things that really stood out for me. Scott, go ahead. Scott.
Sorry, man, you caught me flat-footed. I had a point about Legacy, and I totally forgot what it was.
Wait, was it about the deity allegory or the Buddhist stuff?
No, I'm totally blanking. I'm sorry. I'm so bad at this.
Daft Punk soundtrack. Do you want to talk about the Daft Punk?
Well, the Daft Punk soundtrack is probably one of the best soundtracks in a decade. It's just incredible, but that's not really a great thing to talk about how awesome it is. I mean, I can tell you how much I love it, but that's not really. It's not very.
Oh, okay. No, if you remember, just put your name back in. Nothing.
All right, I will. Yeah, I'll write it down. I'll make a note.
Okay. Now, to follow up on what you're saying about the ISOs, the thing is, if you actually read the comics to where they go between the two movies, the ISOs appear in the system at the same time he finds out his wife is pregnant. So, in their own way, the ISOs are a random creation in the grid at the same time a random creation happens in real life. It is, in a way, a mirror of something happening in his own life. That this is being created, and he's talking about what a miracle it is, the same way that you would talk about birth being a miracle. And in a way, the ISOs are not just about the chaos versus the order, they're also the unexpected, the good that comes into your life that you just aren't ready for, and it's just suddenly there.
You know what? I didn't know that. That's super interesting. That's super cool. I didn't know that. Wow, that threw me for a loop. So then the ISOs, they manifest around the same time that his wife is pregnant with Sam Flynn. Is that what you're saying? Is that when it happened?
Yeah, exactly. He suddenly gets the news about his wife at the same time that he's discovering the ISOs. It's like, whoa, all this good is happening at once.
Huh. And then, okay, but also, this is another thing, too, that there was that comparison between Flynn and Clue as being God and Lucifer. And there's also this thing where Clue is also considered a son of Flynn, like Sam is. And so, because at the end of the film, when at the climax, where Clue is basically come face to face with Kevin Flynn, and they're talking, Clue looks like a child. He looks like a child that basically said, I did everything you asked of me. Why is it you hate me now? Why are you standing in my way? And but there's like this thing where it's like, I want your acceptance. I want your love. I want like what you promised me when we started this, that we were going to do this together as a team, which is also a throwback to earlier in the movie where Kevin Flynn is talking to his son about playing video games together, and he says, are we on the same team? And he says, we're always on the same team. And so there's just so much going on that I really thought was cool. Did you want to say, Scott? Did you want to say that on the chat, since you have?
Actually, you pretty much nailed what I was thinking of. Actually, it had come to me right as you started talking. I was like, "Duh, epiphany," because I hadn't really thought about it in a broader context like that. It's like it was so much of a. I mean, the obvious stuff is obvious, like with the religious stuff that they point out, but it didn't click for me initially until right when you started talking. I was like, oh hey, yeah.
All right, so
real quick
ahead.
Before I forget though,
yeah.
there is a what I was there's an Easter egg in the beginning of Legacy where Flynn is showing Sam like he's playing with the toys and stuff, and if you look on the shelf when he puts one of the toys on the shelf, there's an action figure of one of the broke up old Bob from Black Hole.
Yeah, Bob from Black Hole.
But yeah, so there's that. I just wanted to interject that really quickly.
Well, actually, there's a couple of other ones too. In the first Tron,
Yeah.
there's 2 Easter eggs. One is there's a scene where Bruce Boxleitner's character, who he plays Alan, I forget his last name, but he's like the friend who is in the world, he's Tron, but in the real world, he's basically Kevin Flynn's friend, and he's looking through these, he's going through these cubicles, and there's a sticker, and it has the words Klaatu Varata Necto, which is from...
It says Gort.
Yeah,
it's Gort. Klaatu Varata Necto.
Yes, from the day the Earth stood still. And there's also a bit, which I thought was hilarious. I discovered it for the first time today when I watched the film, where they're in the Tron world in the first film. Sark, who is basically the henchman of the Master Control program, he's looking at a computer screen, and there's just a bunch of lights on there, but randomly, it's like a map of the city or something, but for some reason, Pac-Man is on, he's on there, and he's in front of some dots, and there's Pac-Man sounds coming from the console. It's quite hilarious. It's a nice little nod to Pac-Man. In addition, I don't know if you know this, but there is, if you go to Disney World, they actually have not only the Tron arcade machine, which was a real arcade machine, but they also have the arcade machine for Space Paranoids, which is the game that Kevin Flynn was stolen from him in the original Tron movie. The reason why he's on his beef quest, as it were, it's right there next to the Fix-It Felix Jr., which is a reference to Wreck-It Ralph. So another Disney movie, by the way. But here's a question I want to. Hannah, did you want to say that on the chat or in the show?
I don't know. You think I should?
Yeah, might as well. I mean, it looks like a nice bit of info.
Well, it's just a thought, but I think that the ISOs were brought into the story to represent the variable nature of the factors that particular system was created to monitor or oversee. And the system doesn't work because that level of variability makes it impossible for any system to be perfect. There is no perfect system to deal with a set of factors with an infinitely variable existence. At some point, any system trying to regulate or adapt to such variable factors is going to have a counterproductive response, or basically a response that is it's contraindicated for the factors themselves. If it doesn't, it won't be able to rapidly adapt to changes in the existence of the factors. If it can't correct itself, the entire relationship between the system and the factors will degrade from that point where it comes up with something that's contraindicated for them. And if the intelligence within the system has arrogance as I don't think I copy-pasted it right. Has arrogance as part of its design, it won't be able to self-correct. Yeah, I don't think I copy-pasted what I had originally typed up. But basically, if it's arrogant, it can't self-correct, or if it's arrogant, it can't react. Yeah, it can't self-correct because it can't assume it's wrong. But if it's not arrogant, it can't react rapidly enough because it would have to first take every factor into account, every possibility into account before doing so. It would have to consider longer. So in a system where the factors, like the people basically, are completely unpredictable, then the governing body of the system, the thing that is in charge of the system, or the intelligence behind the system, is stuck in a conundrum that it really can't fix. And in the end, it will eventually become a conflict between the system and the factors that it was created to oversee, simply because the arrogance of the system will end up in conflict with the ability to keep up with changes in the factors, the population.
That's really interesting. I really like that idea of the ISOs and what they represent, because when I first saw them, I was like, that makes no sense. That was the only thing but that's because I'm looking at it logically. But when I think of it as an allegory, and the symbolism, and then with what Nephenor pointed out about what the comics say, it's almost like you have to consume all of the media that there is around this this world to like get like the full picture. And on top of that, you'd have to like still like have the ability to think outside the box and come up with this conclusion, which I don't know. It's good stuff. Yeah. I'm sorry, Hannah. Were you going to say something else?
Well, you thinking about it, as an allegory, it really relates to whether or not there is a perfect system of government. When we get to talking about various systems of government, everybody has their favorite system. Everybody, like their system of government or their favorite economic system, and some people's favorite economic system is their favorite system of government because they don't always necessarily differentiate, and sometimes it's because people don't understand how government works. But the reality is there is no system that is going to be better necessarily than the systems in these two movies at anticipating and fitting into its own design the existence of real people that way. If these systems that we keep putting into place to I don't know, to administrate ourselves, to oversee our civilization or society, if we cannot keep those systems from becoming so rigid that the variability of human existence cannot exist within them, or it cannot continue within them, then no matter what we do, each system that we put into place will eventually degrade in its relationship to the people to the point where it becomes a tyrannical system. So we have to have the ability to basically moderate the system rather than have it become a dictatorial ruler of civilization. It's the same thing in real life as it is in the movies. And I think a lot of the stories with this particular design, whether it's Tron or The Matrix or any other stories throughout history that analyze a system put into place to oversee a population and analyze how that system fails, I think all of them are at their most basic level attempting to get that across to people.
Yeah, because all these stories that are about this, they're all, they're written by people who are making observations about what is the best way to do this thing, can it be done, what are the pitfalls, what are the potential dangers. And Scott pointed out in the chat that another recurring theme with this and lots of other movies like it, technology will overwhelm and destroy humanity. That's a common fear that we have. It's sort of like it's like how we had before. Probably before we had technology as such a big part of our lives, we were thinking about the whole man versus nature thing and how nature, if unchecked, could run rampant and we could be wiped out by that. Now that we're controlling nature and we're taming it, then we have that fear that we would create something that could destroy us. So usually that comes down to things like machines, computers, artificial intelligence, dinosaurs, whatever. It's all stuff that we make, though. And yeah, I think that's also like cautionary, and it's it's concerns that people have, and they turn it into these kinds of stories. So I have a question for you guys. Tron has a lot of religious symbolism in it. All of them do, and The Matrix does too. Now, this isn't about The Matrix, but this is something that I've noticed. Do you guys think that's a bad thing? Because I know that religion is not popular these days. So I'm curious, what do you guys think? Do you think that religious allegories still can function outside, even without the context of religion itself? Or do you think that a movie like Tron is trying to be religious? Or do you think it's just using that as a vessel to tell its story? Scott, you go ahead.
Well, you know what? As somebody who's been an atheist since they were 11, I don't think there's a problem with it. The only time I really see a problem is when they really start to kind of beat you over the head with it. If they're using it as a storytelling device, I'm all right with it. Tron is a movie that you can watch and completely dismiss all those elements and still enjoy it. Same with the second one. It just becomes a plot point because they're not really they're not really forcing it on you so much. It's just there. It's part of the development of the story and the pacing of the story and all that. So I don't really see a problem with it, frankly. I mean, it was an easy route to go, I think, in both films. But yeah, no, I don't see a problem with it at all, really.
All right, Nephenor?
Well, there's also the difference between outright religion and spirituality. I think this errs more on the side of spirituality. It's not so much about religion. Yes, it has elements of specific organized religions, but it doesn't pretty much come out and slam it at you in the face with it, kind of like, well, to give it a better example, it is like Lord of the Rings is to Christianity rather than which the Lion in the Wardrobe is to Christianity.
Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah, as Chronicles to Narnia is to Christianity. It's completely different. It's there, but it's not in your face.
All right, Hannah?
I think also using religious belief systems as an example sort of is it helps to communicate things that in a way that makes it easy for people to understand because it's something that they already know. It doesn't necessarily mean an endorsement. Like in the Tron series, the Tron stories, it's not necessarily this is the way you should live. It's this is what these characteristics are. This is what these factors are. They are similar to these other factors that you've already learned. With the Matrix, it's not necessarily the same, and it's got a more religious aspect to it, but it's not. It's still not so much an endorsement as an acknowledgement that there are certain aspects of religious history and religious philosophy that come from maybe a side of human awareness and human intelligence that we have not found a way outside of religion to define. And things like prophets. Prophets may, in certain cases, be correct about their prophecy, not because they are psychic, but because they have maybe a deeper understanding of human nature and the way things progress in human society, because they understand human nature. So they can predict, for instance, that some guy is going to come along and figure this out, and he will be the one, and these will be the characteristics of the one. Not because I'm psychic and I have I have the higher line to God,
Yes.
but because I understand people, and this is how people are, and this is going to happen eventually. So it's not necessarily, in either of the cases of these two movies, it's not necessarily an endorsement of a particular religion or having a religious outlook, as it is a greater understanding of how people work and how intelligence works.
Rachel?
Yeah, I actually don't really have a problem with the religious allegories in this. I think that, in fact, or the use of religion in media, I guess it depends on what you're using it for, and even then, I mean, people are free to watch whatever they want. But I guess what I want to say about the whole religion and Tron thing is that I think it's an easy way of explaining to the audience that these people are just how oppressed they are, or these programs, because their thoughts are being controlled. You're not allowed to think this particular way. It's the easiest way of saying that free thought is not something that is allowed here. Free speech is not a thing that is allowed here, without having to say very much. Having there be a religion there and having that being quashed is probably the easiest way of saying those things within the context of this film. And of course, there's the recognition of, well, if you're somebody who creates something, if you are capable of creating great things, and you have the mindset that you were created in the image of your creator, then you could technically be a god to someone else, which is kind of a weird thought process to go into, but it's something you kind of have to acknowledge, especially when you get to the situation where the higher the technology, the more advanced technology becomes, the harder it will be to distinguish it from magic, basically. The farther along we go, the more difficult it's going to be to distinguish the two. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it either. I look at religious stories much in the same way that I do any other mythology. And I think that there's often similar lessons that are very, like parallel. Like if I look at ancient Egyptian stories or Greek mythology or other things, I'll find the similar, elements. And I think that they, as stories and as symbols, they have value as long as they're not propagandists, as long as they're not, there to change your mind about something or make you believe in something that you otherwise wouldn't, and that you would, be willing to exercise free will on. And I know that the Tron films are like that. They use it, but it's probably because it's easy. And I think that there may have been a little bit of an effort to get majority audience. In 1982, there was probably, a lot of people that would have gotten that. Although there is also, as Scott mentioned, the idea that that man is God in these films. Like the user is God, and that could be any of us. If we make something, then does it worship us? It's sort of like in that, was it in Futurama? There was an episode where Bender had all these little things on him that thought that they called him the user and they worshipped him as a god. Do you guys remember that?
Well, no, not the user, but yeah, they called him God. And the thing about it is that I think it was something started growing on the side of him and then manifested into a civilization, and they became self-aware, and so they started worshiping him, and so he started imposing his will upon them and giving them advice, and they fucked everything up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah. Oh, here's some fun facts. Did you guys know that in the first Tron film, there was they could not animate CGI at the time, so what Disney had to do was they actually had to take still photos and basically do like individual photographs of every moment and then animate them together. So they couldn't just animate an object the way we do now. They had to turn them into individual frames with a photograph of each thing, and it took them it was like 600 frames for like 4 seconds or some shit like that. So like the light cycle sequences and all the stuff with the I think they're called the recognizer thing. It's like the big N-shaped flying whatever it is. That took them several hours to do. They couldn't animate CG at the time because it's like one of the oldest, one of the first CGI movies ever made. And there's also, I mean, this is kind of obvious, but there's also sequences in the original Tron where they couldn't do CG, so they just animated it with the Disney animators. So it's just 2D animation that's made to look as 3D as they could.
Yes.
There's like these little walking things that show up, and there was something else too. The video game arcade machine for Tron ended up outgrossing the film. Like it made way more money, and I think that's one of the reasons why there was a bit of a following. Like I remember, I never played it, but I remember there was a PC game that was a Tron game. Do any of you guys know about that? I know Nefnor probably does. You know what I'm talking about? It was
it's Tron 2.0.
Yes,
There's
Tron 2.0.
Tron
Never
game.
played a PC version.
Yeah, in fact, I've got it sitting on my shelf right now, and it's about what was Tron's user's name?
Tron's user's name?
It was Alan.
Alan,
It was
thank
Alan.
you. Alan Bradley. You're playing as his son in that one. So.
Oh yeah, that's
a
right.
little bit. Yep.
Right. Another thing about Tron Legacy is that it was actually setting up another film. And so there's a lot of stuff that's being set up, because you mentioned the son, and I thought the son of Dillinger, who was played by Cillian Murphy, is in the Tron Legacy, and I'm fairly certain they were planting the seeds for another movie. But right now, as far as I know, it's either not getting made or it's in development hell. So who knows if they're going to make another one.
I believe it's still in development. I heard
No,
something
the third
recently.
one's been canceled.
Oh, did they finally cancel it? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
unfortunately.
Gotcha.
At least for now. We'll see. it's one of those things like, you know, there's we could do a whole show about movies that were supposed to get sequels but never did, and we really wanted them to make them. And I wanted to see what they were going to do, because I felt that with Legacy they were trying to like probably breathe new life into this franchise that already had a kind of questionable existence. And admittedly, I was curious as to why Disney would want to do it, but because I know that. I'm sorry?
Oliver.
Yo.
If you haven't seen it already, take a look at the comic book series Tron: The Ghost of the Machine, because it follows up from the Tron 2.0 game.
Oh, good. Well, that actually references back to the question of what was the established effort made to expand the universe.
Yes, it has. They have a lot. They have actually a couple different comics based on it, plus the newer game for PS3 systems and all that.
Wait, there was a newer game on PS3?
Well, it was basically the beginning of the movie kind of thing, like the events just before the second movie.
Right, and then there was the cartoon Uprising, which also took place
about the same time as the game.
Yeah, time period wise. So yeah, there's a lot out there. Does anyone else has any things to say, or I'm just gonna close out? We're just like finishing up. It looks like we're out of stuff to talk about, although we did give Tron a good hour and change, which is more than I expected. So, no, anybody?
We could talk about the Matrix. I'd be okay with that.
That's a whole.
There is no spoon, damn it.
I know. I want to come back for that podcast. I want to talk about the Matrix.
Well, how will we eat all this ice cream then? How will we eat the pudding if there's no spoon?
Sporks.
And how can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat?
You don't have any pudding.
You eat your pudding with a straw.
Oh, blasphemy.
Oh, well, actually, you know what? I want to say something. In Legacy, when Sam gets to Flynn's apartment thing, they're eating a pig. And where did they get a pig?
Oh, you want to talk about the plot holes?
Oh, no, there's plenty. That was something that was just so
they
glaring.
the pig, and they could just copy and paste it anytime they need it.
Yeah, I guess they could, but there's so many. There are some pretty glaring plot holes, though. That was one that it's so damn funny.
No, why are they even eating food?
Yeah, exactly. And they breathe. They're computers, and they talk about breathing and getting out of breath. They do that in both movies.
And they did drink. They did drink water or whatever the fuck that was.
This
that
energy.
Actually, in the first one, wasn't water. They were talking about that. They said that was kind of like an energy source.
Yeah, it's pure energy.
Okay.
Because all the energy had been co-opted by Master Control.
Yeah, but they were sipping on it out of wine glasses in the second movie. It's the same stuff.
Yeah.
Because I had no so you'll see in Legacy when they're drinking at the dinner table, it's the same glowy blue water that's in the first film, and it's also in the bar where the David Bowie guy is at. That's everyone's drinking the energy.
And where Daft Punk is.
What?
Well, remember Daft Punk were the DJs in the bar.
Oh yeah, they were totally. Because they gave us a soundtrack, so. But yeah, what's another big glaring plot hole in either of those movies? There's so many, right?
That Daft Punk achieved so much while being French.
I'm curious.
I'm just kidding. I'm
curious if they don't make a sequel, it leaves it hanging. But I'm curious whether or not the ISO chick was actually given a history and a social security number, because how the heck is she going to exist in the modern world without those?
Well, Sam is a billionaire.
She's in the world at all. Like, how does she even
He's
physically
a billionaire. Exist? He's a computer hacker. I think he can make it happen.
Yeah.
Well, it's already been established in sci-fi movies that women can come out of the computer. I mean, Weird Science did that back in the 80s. So.
Thank you, Oingo.
That's
true.
a good point. I assumed he had a 3D printer.
There we go.
And that's basically what he did, was he printed her out. So they're gonna have sex, and was that part of the plan? Because when they're like talking, Flynn is like totally into it. Like Kevin Flynn, the father, he's like, yeah, they're gonna hook up just like I wanted. So what's
because he was talking about curing disease and all these other things.
Yes,
how does that exactly work, though? I mean,
he has all the parts. We assume.
Does she? That's another question. It's kind of like the problem that happens after every single movie when you assume that people are gonna go off and they're gonna get together and have sex, but there are problems that aren't answered. Like the wedding night of like Ariel and the prince, like after the Little Mermaid. I mean, imagine that whole discussion that's gonna go down like right before shit happens.
Ariel's
we're in the exact same problem here. Okay,
Ariel's gonna do what she always does. She's gonna starfish.
She's gonna lay there like a fish, basically, like
to do because they're all starfish.
Well, or maybe I don't know. Maybe she's into it. I don't fucking know. I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, she's probably like laying eggs and stuff like that before that.
She expects him to come all over them.
I mean, that's
he's gonna jizz all over her eggs. But we're getting off topic. I want to stay on Tron.
Well, just saying that's.
Cora eats, so we must assume that she does other human functions that are, as well.
Here's a question. How did Kevin Flynn get his hands on all those old books? Where do you get Tolstoy and fucking Nietzsche and all that stuff and put it on his shelf?
He downloaded them from Google Books.
No. You're forgetting. He is a super user. He literally can he creates things in the world. So creating something from something that was in the computer already easy.
Oh, wait, would that then be the books as they existed, or as he imagined them to be?
You could do it as either one.
Well, here's the thing, though, that to kind of dispute that, when he's fixing Cora's arm, he doesn't just fix it. He doesn't just like go woo arm. He has to unlock the code, and he finds the code piece that's broken, and he gets rid of it. So I don't know. He can't create. He can control things like he did when he was controlling the recognizer in the first one.
No. It actually talks about that in both the comics and the movie. He actually
does.
He actually created the system. He created it as it was. He created Clue. He created this. He does have the ability. He's the only one in the world who has the ability to create.
Because it seemed to me that there was a bit of a gray area because they showed him not just going booga booga booga. She's got an arm.
No,
he wants to make the arm the way it was before, and it is a particularly complex thing. So if he just creates, it might not match.
Right.
Also, you have to understand that since Cora is an ISO, he didn't actually make it.
Oh,
he contributed to its existence in a way. But that's why he says when he's doing that, where he's like looking at how to fix it, he says, "I didn't write all of it. Most of it is beyond me." Yeah. And basically, what he's doing is he's going in and basically tinkering with it till he figures out how to fix it. But he didn't create her originally because she's one of the random events essentially.
Well, and even if he couldn't create, as far as the books are concerned, because the system he's in, I mean, it could just as easily be not separate from all of the rest of the grid. It could be that he did reach out and find those things and pull them into his sphere of existence.
Oh, you know what I just thought of? He said he had been going back and forth, so maybe he brought the books with him from the real world into the grid.
He brought a lot of things with him when he came in.
That's probably
okay. Yeah, I didn't even. Yeah, it just dawned on me because he had said that he'd been going back and forth.
That's where he got the pick from when he copied and pasted it.
Okay.
He also apparently had a guest bedroom just in case his son happened to drop by. Which his son didn't even use, by the way. He can spend one night in his dad's place, which was in the mountains.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Oh, it was kind of a valley, wasn't it? Anyway, I don't know. I guess there's really not much else to say. I really like the film. I wouldn't even say it's a guilty pleasure. It's not like Van Helsing. That's a guilty pleasure.
Ooh. Sorry. Was that out loud? I apologize.
Oh God, Kate Beckinsale's fucking accent in that entire film. Holy shit.
You guys just gotta have fun.
Unlike some Robin Hoods.
You know, we should do that for Halloween. We should do that for Halloween. We should do a couple of different movies for Halloween, because that's going to be something that'll come up, of course, in October.
I think we got to do a show about guilty pleasures, films that we know the rest of the world hates, but we like.
Ooh.
Maybe even films that we know that we shouldn't like that we do like anyways.
That will be a great stream.
Yeah, right?
Trying to
Oh, no,
justify
'cause then you
guilty
have to.
pleasure.
Then you have to own up to it. The thing about
One word.
God.
Retsuko
Oh,
Doji.
My confession, and I can make more. Damn it. Don't care. Well, okay.
Legally
so
Blonde.
I'm gonna take us out.
There, I said it.
The totally Legally Blonde. But really? Okay.
No.
Don't use up good stuff.
There, I said it.
He said, "Really?" I could hear the hatred in his voice. Like, what is wrong with you?
The condescension was so thick.
How can you not like a movie where a woman realizes that in her entire life she's just been fucking sliding by on her looks, finally decides to fucking smarten up and develop a personality? How can you not like
Would
it?
you like a bullet points list emailed to you tomorrow?
No.
It's
I'm
it's
just
quite
saying,
possible.
okay?
Going
I'm
back
just
to
saying.
Tron, it's quite possible that the only thing they were thinking was video games are cool. What would it be like to be in one? And then they made a movie about it. And we're over here thinking they did something fantastic, or at least deep. But I don't know. I still do. Okay, so guys, if you're listening and you have thoughts about Tron, love it or hate it, because it's probably how it is, go ahead and leave your comments. If there's anything that you observed that made it suck harder or be more cool or more interesting, please feel free to leave a comment. We love to hear what you guys have to say. And if you have a guilty pleasure film, go ahead and put the name of the film that you know sucks, but you still like it. Or maybe you were just with the right people at the time, or on the right drugs, or whatever, and you just like the film as a result. I'm not saying that you should take drugs. Don't. But I'm saying if you just happen to, I can't stop you because I just can't. And if you like the stuff that we do here, please come and visit our Patreon. Mike, can you tell people where to go to donate to our Patreon?
www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. Yes. Definitely it.
www.patreon.com.
Give us more money, you fascist bully boy bastards.
Yes. The capitalism is great. Double plus good. Anybody have anything else to say before I close the show? No. All right.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no. Thanks for coming on.
Having me on.
We'll do it again.
Read my comic.
Yes, check out Nethanor's comic, The Devil's
Devilscontract.com.
Contract.com. All right. See you guys later. Thanks for everything.